All right, everyone. Welcome to Deep Dives with Dogs. Well, today we're going to talk about draft riots, more specifically the 1863 draft riot, Civil War draft riots. Draft riots are not uncommon. A lot of people feel the draft is unfair in many cases, and so they will riot. There are obviously times when people didn't feel that way. Best example is probably World War II. Most people didn't necessarily feel too bad about getting drafted then, but there are other times where people do. 1863, the New York City draft riots are one example, for instance, which I'll try to focus in on, but there are others, and then I'll talk about. 1863 draft riots mostly had to do with the fact that at this time, to get out of the draft, there was a fee you could pay. The idea is, hey, if you're not going to fight, at least you can pay money, and the idea is the money is to help with the war effort. It's about $300, which is 1863 money, not 2026 money, so gold standard still, and a lot of people would pay, obviously the rich men would pay so they didn't have to fight in this war. However, those who could not pay would have to fight. That would usually be poor immigrants. Not just immigrants, obviously, just poor in general, but a lot of them did tend to be immigrants. Specifically Irishmen. There's a lot of Irishmen that fight in this war because of the drafts. A lot of Irish immigrants. Not unsurprising. The Irish are pretty poor, and they're very much racially discriminated upon. Besides, obviously, the people that were enslaved, the Irish are probably the most hated group of people. Mostly for a mix of things. They're Catholic and they're others. That's kind of the idea. But people didn't like the Irish. But these 1863 draft riots kind of spur up this. There's a whole slogan for it. It's rich man's war, poor man's fight. A lot of the people in charge are obviously kind of rich men. And so, the poor men have to go fighting for these rich men. It's not really untrue. It's not an untrue statement. Obviously a little more complicated than that, but like with anything, people are going to feel this way. These riots are kind of a good thing for the South, actually, because a lot of this kind of goes to be like, hey, maybe if these continue to happen, the South can survive, which that's all the South really wants to do. They just want to survive. So the only way to survive is to hope that the Union kind of gives up. It's like, the cost of the war is too much, either in morale or supplies or men or whichever. So these draft riots are pretty good for them. Gives them a sign of, hey, look, maybe the Union will fall apart. New York City draft riots actually get pretty bad. I don't believe that anyone's executed for them. I don't believe that is something that happens, but I do believe people did die during them. I think troops had to be brought in. Actually, troops that were fighting in the Civil War, funnily enough, had to be brought in. I guess they were on break more so, but Jasper's trying to get Rocky to play. But, yeah. But troops would be brought in, try to quell this riot. Of course, it was reasonable, but it gets to a point where it becomes very much quickly unreasonable. So troops are brought in. But obviously, this is not a insular event. There have been other drafts where people have had this kind of feeling. Another one would be Vietnam. Vietnam is Vietnam is definitely more loud than the New York City draft riots. The New York City draft riots are big, but they're very localized to New York. Other places did kind of have these smaller protests, but it was not as big as New York was. But in Vietnam, obviously, there's a much bigger outcry across the nation. A lot of people abstained from going to that war, very much did not want to go to it, opposed to it inherently. Not to say everyone was. There were people that wanted to fight, but yeah, a lot of people that were very much opposed to it. But those are a little bit more complicated, are they not? Yeah, Vietnam definitely is a case of where the draft very much villainized, which not unreasonable. It's just not. Many people felt they were fighting for something that they didn't really care for or didn't want to. So it's when you'll get a riot usually, when people fight for things they don't really care about. But that is going to do it for this video. If you guys like the video, leave a like. If you have any ways I can improve on these videos, leave a comment down below. I appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.